James Felton here. Commissioner Stephen Rulon
Here.
and Commissioner Cynthia Tanabe
Here.
and Steve Hunt present. So we are all ready to go. So we will have a moment of silence before we do the Pledge of Allegiance. Y'all please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda, looks like we have special presentations.
We have no special on.
Okay,
And for the minutes of
Them earlier, I did print them if somebody would like.
yeah, at some point we'll need to approve the minutes.
I could pass these and you could look and then improve. If that's, it's not on the agenda though.
I don't.
It's
There's
one-
already consent agenda.
Oh, okay.
Number 6A.
Item 6A, I would say it is.
That's okay.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll defer the minutes from last meeting to next meeting. That sounds so government, doesn't it? This is the place to be on a Thursday night. Welcome.
Chair, I think we do have an item for announcements.
Like I said, is there anybody from the public that would like to make any comments? Doesn't appear that there will be anybody stepping up today. Okay. So we are, where are we here?
7, 8 action items.
Okay. What's it? So this is again, we're giving the public the opportunity to,
This will be a presentation by staff.
on item 7?
7A.
Oh, 7A, okay. Regarding the collector streets.
Yeah, well, actually, all the streets. I'll be making a presentation of city's payment for your input. This is the actual selection of the streets. Called the last meeting. High level presentation of what the program is, what types of streets make up of the city street network, rating of the condition of the city streets, and different types of treatments that can be applied to streets to down or rehabilitate them. So that we explained that we were working through the funding that we have and working with our payment management.
Oops, turned off my mic. Working with our pavement management program to come up with the list of streets that are recommended for the next 3 years, which is important for the public and getting the word out so people understand when certain streets are going to be maintained, if their streets are going to be maintained in the next 3 years, that they see a lot of construction going on. And it will be ultimately the list that we will turn over to our program management team that is working on putting together the packages to bid and actually construct the maintenance and reconstruction of the streets. So I guess without further ado, I can take you through the presentation. We've included a presentation on the dais there for you, but I'll work through the slides here. Again, an overview, quick overview of roadway system classification and condition. I'll talk high level on funding sources and levels, and then we'll get right into the recommended projects. So, in the street classifications, the street network is made up of three basic classifications. We have the residential streets or local streets. I think we talked about referring to them as local streets as opposed to residential streets. That's where the trips originate and end for the most part. They're smaller streets, lower traffic. As people continue on their trip, those local streets funnel into collector streets, a little bit wider, can handle more traffic. And then those collectors will funnel into arterials, which are the streets that are gonna cross the city and connect with regional travel ways. So those three basic levels, local with the least amount of traffic, collector increasing, and arterials with the highest levels of traffic. And each level deteriorates based on the traffic it sees at different rates over the life of the street. Okay, we talked about street condition last time and kind of went over how the rating system works. Anything from what we call good to excellent, anywhere between 70 and 100%. And you know, as a city, we want to be somewhere around that 70%. Between 50 and 70, you're starting to get at risk. And 25 to 50 is considered poor condition, and anything under 25 has failed. So the goal of the program was to come up with a solution that will get the city's overall condition for the entire street network, which is a composite of the conditions of all the various segments of the street, to get an overall rating of 70% or better. And that's something we've been wrestling with for quite a few years, for as long as I've been here. The next slide is the slide with the, can you see these on the screens in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I can see it over there. And
Why does the screens change?
I don't know.
No. You can, that's it, maybe. I don't think so.
We'll have to get booster seats for the commission next time.
What about just sliding it forward, maybe?
Will it work or? Okay.
We have a box like this, like this.
Now we
that's-
don't, now we don't know who you are.
That's a true Public Works Commission solution right
Right.
there.
This is how you get this chair, by the way.
You always wondered if your name plaques were useful, so there you go.
What's gonna be funny is when the council person comes in and looks for their sign. Leave it there, okay?
Leave it there.
Hey, that's not yours, is it?
Monitor props.
Okay.
Okay,
So
so.
just sit and watch and then let us know in a month how long it took.
So we presented this graph the last time that showed two different scenarios that would get us to stay above our 70 on the condition overall for the city streets, with the front loading upfront and using Measure X funding to bond against our revenue stream for Measure X funding for bonding. One scenario, 7, included like the full upfront front loading, and scenario 8 was $1 million less upfront and tracked a little bit lower than scenario 7. It was recommended by commissioners that we should really look at investing that $1 million upfront, and we did. And as I'll point out, it became kind of a solution for, I think, our overall program. We'll keep the condition higher And we'll get a higher overall condition up front. So, and as I mentioned, the different types of funding for this program are, we do have some general fund funding that are planned for this year and going forward. Previously, we have been putting $1.6 million a year in for funding. In working through these scenarios, we found that we could draw that down to 1 million a year, and that 600,000 could go towards other city needs such as staffing or things, because it is an ongoing revenue source and could be used for stuff like that. So it's some additional money for city council to consider as they're putting together the next budget. But that's included in that scenario 7 that we've worked into these streets that staff is recommending coming forward with for the program over the next 3 years.
Brian, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So those budgets were drawn up how long ago?
I want to say we probably started that around 2017, 2018 for that general fund contribution.
Has there been any concern by anybody regarding just the rapid cost of goods and materials over the last 2 or 3 years? Inflation in general.
I can't speak for the public. I'm sure they have concerns about it. On the staffing level, yes, we have concerns about it. As we looked at these scenarios, we did put in escalation factors into the program system for cost going forward. But we also have escalation factors for the tax revenue that kind of tracks with that as well. So we wanted to make sure they were kind of tracking the same. So, we do put into the system an increase in dollar costs and dollar revenue, as opposed to just assuming everything stays flat. So that was built into this because we don't want to run into any cliff falls after we've invested multiples of millions of dollars into the system. Yes.
I also have a question. So on the Measure X bond money, I'm assuming there are limitations on what you can use it for, correct?
That's
So
correct.
Can you go into that a little bit more?
Our Measure
When you
X
said-
funding can only be used for roadway projects, transportation type projects, and that was a restriction of the funding that the voters voted for.
Will it also cover staffing, you said? Staffing for those projects?
No, that was the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the Measure for X we're putting towards projects.
Specifically project
Yes,
9. Okay, thank
specific
you.
projects. Also, funding source is the Senate Bill 1, the gas tax increase that was approved a few years back. And that's dedicated to our pavement program. And then, as you mentioned, the Measure X, that revenue stream, we're pledging money from that going forward. That will still leave about 400,000 a year in today's dollars going towards our pavement program as a direct contribution. The rest of that will go towards paying the debt service on the bonds themselves. So any questions on that before I start showing you the nice pictures of our city streets?
I have a quick question. So it's agreed that the scenario 7 is the way that we're intending to go?
That is the way that we've generated this list and what I'm going to show you. And that's what,
Excellent, because scenario 7 for $1 million upfront investment yields over the next 30 years equal to or better results for the entire time. So it seems like certainly the best way to go.
yes, definitely. You can see the blue line tracking equal or above scenario 8 throughout this
Super.
scenario. So
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So another thing that was brought up at our last meeting, we showed that in these scenarios we looked at the first 5 years, but comparing today and where the streets will be in 5 years. And so for each of the different classes of roadway, arterial, collector, and local, on the far right, you can see we kind of look at the blue bar is good. Those are the good streets. We want to be there. Over on the right, the yellow bars, those are the failed streets. That's not where we want to be. So kind of comparing where we are today, the bars on the left with the bars on the right for each classification, you can see that in the first 5 years, the local or residential, we've completely addressed all the failed streets. And that was a direction from city council to staff as we developed these scenarios. Council did not want the local streets left behind, simply because they have lower traffic and wouldn't necessarily contribute as high a gain in the overall city network. But we have achieved that. There was a list of 25 failed streets. As we ran them in today's scenarios, we discovered that there are actually 33 failed streets, and we incorporated all of those into these street lists that are coming forward over the next 3 years. Going over to the left, the arterials, actually the failed streets go up slightly on that one. But as I mentioned, the arterials are the streets where we have the big projects and where we go after grant funding for improvements for pedestrians and bicycles and different modes of travel that there are pots of money out there for. So staff will focus on closing that gap with the grant funding that we can go after. And then the one in the middle is the collector streets, and the commissioners had mentioned the collector streets along with that $1 million investment in the front loading. Can we look at the collector streets and do a better job with the failed collector streets there? So as you look at the collectors in the failed under this first 5 years of the scenarios, it drops from 13% to 10%. We certainly want to go lower, but the next slide I show you is going to show you what happens over through 2047 in the long term.
Hey, Brian, quick question of clarification. So when I'm looking at these percentages, like for arterial, 68 good, 25 fair, 7 poor, 2% failed. Is that telling us that if we have 100 miles of these arterial roads, that 2% are failed? 2% of those roads, 2 miles is failed?
Yes. That's
Versus
correct.
the number of streets?
No, it would be, it would,
2% of the system. It has
It's-
to, I'm guessing it has to be because
it's,
there's only 4 or 5 arterial streets.
yeah, let me verify on that, because I don't know if they put a factor in there to rate it based on distance, lane miles along with that, or if it's by street segment itself. So it could be either percentage of street segments or actual miles of the network itself. Arterials are generally going to have longer segments. So I'd hate to provide you with the wrong information here.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
It's not a question, I'm just a comment. I would think the only reasonable way to look at this would be lane miles. Percentage of lane miles. An arterial is 2 lanes.
I would
not
hope
twice as
so.
much.
I would hope so, that it is weighted by distance and not just segments, because segments can vary in length. So,
A 300-foot segment, a 660-foot segment. I mean,
yes, Okay. So here we go into the long term, looking into the crystal ball. We've done this front loading scenario. We've stuck with the program going forward, paying debt service on the bond, plus the revenues that we'll still have coming in. And so we've projected it out to 2047. And what we see, again, sticking with the collectors in the middle, at 2047, we've gone from 13% down to 4%. So we see in the long term on the program, the collectors continue to improve beyond the initial front loading. The residential, we're going to have to keep an eye on. 2% does pop up out there at 2047. So there's potential for some of those residential streets to go down slightly. And then again, the arterials are the ones where we definitely want to look for grant funding because the arterials don't fare as well in our long-term projections on this scenario. So. And then, is there no questions on that? I'd like to get into the pictures. So for the first year, already in design with our consultants is the street reconstruction package that includes all the residential streets, those 33 failed streets. And that'll be one of the first projects to go out to bid. It's going to be one of the bigger ticket item projects because it is a more intensive rehabilitation method. But we also, the other benefit is we have $11.5 million of bond funding, and the investors expect that that's going to be invested in the pavement fairly quickly. So we'll be able to show that we've made that investment that they provided the money for, or at least most of it in this first year coming up. So on this first slide here, this first map, you'll see some streets in red. Those are the streets that are identified for reconstruction in this next fiscal year. Yes.
Brian, are these streets in red different categories of street, or are they all the smallest traffic level street?
These are going to be the local or residential streets. Yes, these were specifically identified, those 33 streets to go into this initial program. But there's also another project slated for next year. This one is only showing the reconstructions. This next slide, I'm going to show you the slurry seal project for next fiscal year as well. Two different types of construction activity. We're going to package it as two different types of contracts to solicit bids for the contractors that engage in those specific types of activities, as opposed to trying to commingle them. We think we'll get a better bids by separating them by specialty.
Very good. Appreciate the clarity. Thank you.
So this next map shows the slurry seal project also planned for next year. And the slurry seal looks like it can be a combination of collectors and local streets, just kind of looking at the map. And that kind of rounds out that first 10.3 million in the first year. A lot of dollars going into it. You know, quite a few streets being impacted, but only 2 contracts to manage in that first year. So this next one's going to look a little bit more busy. The following fiscal year 24-25, we have a recommended project. And I got to put my glasses on for this one. It's a combination of micro surfacing shown in kind of the purple. Overlays are shown in kind of a turquoise overlay of 2 inches. And then a couple of the streets look like they need a little bit of rehab before the overlay. And those are kind of a really dark purplish brown. And that's the plan for that second year. You're seeing more of the arterials being hit in this one and collectors. So a little bit more focus on arterials and collectors. And that second year is $7.4 million worth of work. Yes?
So, in regards to the IMGIM project, when is that slated to be finished by? If it's starting this summer?
Starting this summer, and so we're in 2024, so we're looking at summer of 2026 finishing.
Okay,
And yes,
so
we
I-
do
I
have-
noticed that.
We do have this, and I asked Edry, as he was putting this together, I said, we have engine in construction. Are we going to be able to do this? And he said, yes, he believes we can, because the microsurfacing for this type of project's only going to occur over a few days. It's a really short duration project. And the microsurfacing itself, the treatment, it doesn't take as long for it to cure and get traffic back on it. Actually, getting the traffic on it earlier helps.
Even with like the painting of the stripes back on and everything.
The
Do they have
stripes
to do
will,
that?
the stripes will have to, they'll do the temporary floppies and striping until they can come back and do the striping. But once it's ready for the striping, that goes down pretty quick. So we're definitely cognizant of that. You know, if it looks like it's not going to be feasible, we can always move this to the following year. So
When you said, he said we could possibly do it, who's he?
Edry De Los Santos, the senior engineer, he's been working extensively with the pavement program. And so, yes, but definitely very, very aware of frustrating motorists in Marina. So we will see if it makes sense to do that or not. Yeah, we've kind of taken away, well, we haven't taken away one option. We've restricted one option on Imogene Parkway, and we kind of anticipate more traffic on Reservation. So the Reservation one may be more impactful than actually addressing the Imogene Parkway, because the Imogene Parkway is already going to be down to one lane each direction, and kind of constrained going through the traffic construction zone for Imogene.
Then that brings up another question, that the second, what is it, Second Avenue extension, which is not on here because it would be a new street, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
When is that? That would be lessening some of the pressure on some of these other.
Well,
But it's-
that's quite a few years out
Okay,
on
okay.
this, so won't be providing any relief
Okay.
in these scenarios. And it would actually be more of a relief if they were doing work on Highway 1, I guess, you know, because it is running parallel to that, so. Okay, and then our third year, fiscal year 25-26, our recommended projects, and this gets even more colorful in the different types of treatments. This third year is kind of our catch-all. We saw some of these smaller packages that showed up earlier in the scenarios. So what we did is as we were bundling these into you know, similar type projects, we wanted to have good sized projects to bid and get some economy of scale on. So some of these other smaller projects kind of move towards that third year. And there's a variety of these on here, but there's maybe some possibilities of combining these into different types of projects. Like, for instance, the Cape Seal with dig outs, and we have microsurfacing. The end result is somewhat similar on those. So if we only have a couple streets on the Cape Seal, it's likely that we'll probably change that to a microsurfacing treatment to get a bigger microsurfacing contract. And then the overlay and surface reconstruction with 4-inch overlay will apply lessons learned from those streets that require more rehab to see if there's an efficient way that we can bundle those and get a good project out of it. And so you're seeing those streets there. Again, this is going to be a mix of pretty much collectors and local streets in that final year. And then, just in case people wondered, we've looked at this in basically 4 different slides over 3 years as to which streets are going to be treated. So we did prepare a slide that combines all the streets that get treated over those 3 years into one map. So you can see that we're getting pretty good distribution and coverage throughout the city and hitting quite a few of our streets in the city over those first 3 years. And then in your packet, the actual list of streets is included by year and treatment type. So full listing there. If you're curious about any particular street, it's unfortunately not searchable in paper form, but as we worked with our consultant that's putting together the website for public information on this program. The information is going to be up there by year, by package. And in that will be a similar map like this, as well as a table below it that has the streets listed, what streets being treated and what from what intersection to what intersection, so that the web page should be searchable. If somebody wanted to go on the web page and look for a particular street, it'll direct them to where that is on the page. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commissioners have on our next 3-year pavement program.
I have a question, but I don't exactly know how to phrase it. There seems to be 2 different types of gain for the streets. The one is the full reconstruction, which is the most expensive and most invasive, and it brings something from low quality to highest quality. So
Yeah.
as far as improving your CPI percentage, that gives you the biggest bang for the buck, I would assume. However, at the expense of the least invasive, which is maintenance, that gives you the longer run benefit. Right? Because if you do the maintenance, it's not going to deteriorate. So it's less expensive to maintain it than it is to allow it to deteriorate
Mhm.
and then have a larger cost to bring it back up.
Mhm.
How was that factored in as to applying these dollars and timeline for the different projects?
We sought a balance, although, yeah, we were focusing on those 33 residential streets to address in this program. The remainder of it was purely just the program telling us where to best invest our money. And, that's where the focus comes in. You're going to see outside of that initial package, there are some reconstructs in there, but the majority of it is going to be the microsurface slurries and those types of maintenance projects. And so that's where try to keep that balance in there.
As I said, I didn't know how to phrase it very well, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate that clarity that you offer. Thank you.
Mhm. And I think all totaled over that is about 21 million over those 3 years. And it still keeps a little over $500,000 in reserve as type of a contingency fund. If we get into some of these projects and we find that a certain type of treatment is maybe costing a little bit more or something, we won't have to up in the whole program just to keep it going.
Brian, can you express that $500,000 more as a percentage contingency fund rather than a dollar amount?
I should,
Ballpark is fine.
no, I don't do math on the fly. Yeah, I didn't make it. I only made it through engineering school because I had a calculator.
I don't really believe that, but it's.
No, and I can't even do math. Oh, no, I gotta do it over here. Oh, I'd fail that one. That's about 2.5%. Yeah. I think I do have a slide rule somewhere just for nostalgia, I guess. So, I guess if there are no more questions about the pavement program, we plan on presenting this to City Council next Tuesday. So we'll meet with City Council, see if they have any input on the next 3-year program, and then we'll go from there. Our pavement program consultant knows that we're working on this, and we'll be able to turn the list over to them so they can start completing the website, and also get started to working on the next 2 or 3 packages. So we've got a number of packages coming through the pipeline, and we'll have projects coming out at a fairly consistent rate as we go through these next 3 years.
How likely is it for these to occur on time? Projects are always at risk due to a number of different factors, and if project A or project 1 does not get completed, what's the effect on the remaining projects?
You know, we ran the scenario for these 3 years, so the program didn't look at all these streets were identified in the first year. It identified streets in the first year, it identified streets in the second year, and streets in the third year. So that progression is kind of built into the scenario, and it took into effect kind of where the system, if there's deterioration going on at the same time as treatments being applied, and that was factored into the overall condition coming out the other end. So a little bit of wiggle room in there, a few months here and there, but for the most part, that's been factored in. Yes.
So does the, as you're deciding between, as you're labeling some of these streets, I'm looking at how you classify some of them. For example, like Rhine-Dollar, it's classified as a collector.
Yes, that's correct.
But the amount of traffic on Rhine-Dollar and like the size of the vehicles traveling on Rhine-Dollar makes it feel like an arterial. It's being used more as an arterial, even though location-wise it should be a collector.
It may feel like it because the street's a little bit narrower, but if you compare the traffic on Rhine-Dollar to say Reservation at kind of the same time of the day,
Okay,
there's a distinct difference.
and
And
that
it's-
doesn't
and the-
change
and
the
the-
recommended surface for the different streets? Like
It's,
the average loads that they're taking?
it does. The collector streets have a different deterioration curve than the locals and the arterials. So based on the level of traffic, the more traffic, the faster it deteriorates. So, okay, well,
Trucks coming
I
down.
have a question.
Here on the street.
This is just, pavement improvement, but are there associated improvements such as handicap ramps being constructed, striping, maybe modification of striping plans?
yes, thank you for asking that. As we're working with our consultant, one of the first things, one of the first meetings we have, we turn over a lot of data to them, what our standards are here in the city and things that we want to achieve with this program. 2 pieces that we're looking at implementing at the same time wherever possible. Well, I'll say 3. The city, most cities have an ADA transition plan. Wherever we don't have handicap ramps, when we do a certain treatment on the street of microsurface or higher level, then if we encounter a corner that doesn't have a handicap ramp on it, we'll install it as part of the project. So there will be quite a few handicap ramps going in throughout these 3 years. And more than just putting handicap ramps in, the consultant is also going to bounce these lists off our safe routes to school plan. We call it the safe walking and biking to school plan. So they're going to look around any of the school zones. If any streets get identified for treatment in those school zones, in that plan identifies stuff such as pedestrian bulb outs at the corners of the streets. Instead of putting in a regular handicap ramp, we're going to bulb that out when we put that in, so we can be implementing that safe routes to school plan at the same time. And similarly with any striping changes, we would implement that according to what's been identified in that plan. The other plan is the active transportation plan. That's something that was updated, I want to say 2018 maybe. And that identifies where all our bicycle routes are and where we're planning on doing pedestrian improvements. So to the extent that those can be implemented in the striping changes, when they resurface the street, come back to restripe afterwards, we'll be looking to implement those changes at that time. So we're trying to kill all these birds with these same stones as we go through this.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions, we got quite a few projects to go through tonight on our next item. So.
I didn't look carefully. I found this on the other part.
I think I'm gonna need this. It's gonna be good. All right, so the city works on a cycle. Cities generally work on a 1 year or a 2 year budget cycle. A few years ago, the city of Marina decided to go to 2 year budgets. I think this is our third 2 year budget that we're working on right now. And typically, cities try to have their budgets approved come January 1st with the new fiscal year. I would say we're a little bit behind here in Marina, but striving to get there as soon as we can after July 1st. But Public Works focuses on, well, we have probably the most complex pieces of the budget with the most special funds and various different pieces of infrastructure and facilities and fleet and all the stuff that we have to work on here. But I'm going to focus on the capital improvement plan program. I often like to call it, everybody calls it a capital improvement program. When we say CIP, they say, oh yeah, it's a capital improvement program. But really it's a community investment program, community investment plan of how we're going to take care of our infrastructure and how we're going to build out our infrastructure to meet the needs of the community. So you're going to see some projects here that will help the existing infrastructure, and there will be some projects for new infrastructure, whether that be for recreational facilities or to accommodate traffic growth due to development, and some stuff to help the city operate more efficiently. So these are the longer term investments, and they go into our capital improvement program. So as I present these, just kind of looking for overall, if there's comments, concerns, and then maybe at the tail end, if you feel like, you're seeing some holes in there, maybe. We've covered quite a bit, the gamut of this, from facilities to parks to streets to planning to internal IT systems and stuff like that. So, but you may have some things that you have in mind that maybe we didn't have on here. And I would say we probably have more in here than the funding will allow. So, by the time it gets to city council, there will be some decisions to be made, because in the end, there's only so much in the pots of money to fill projects at this time. So, ready? Okay.
I just don't hear it.
This first slide is very anticlimactic. It just says tier number 1. I didn't have any time to add any text under it, so I'm just going to say, as we package these together, we put some of the highest priority from, kind of staff perspective, a little bit of what council's input is provided, and we kind of package those into the tier 1. And pretty much the tier 1, there's funding available to get to those. And then there are some tier 2 and tier 3 projects. And then there are probably some on there that I didn't get into the package that won't be able to identify. So I'll roll into it with the tier 1. This first one's going to be really easy. We just talked about it. It's the street reconstruction and resurfacing program for the next 2 years. We've talked about 3. So that's just kind of a high level budget numbers. The way these are structured, gives a project title at the top. There's a brief project description. It notes funding sources or possible funding sources. Different pots of money have different types of restrictions or lack of restrictions, and that kind of determines what projects they can go towards. And then there's proposed budget numbers for each of the projects. So this first one is the street resurfacing. And if you see like a funny looking alpha numeric identifier in front of it, that means it's one that's currently in the capital improvement program and has a project number with it. So it's allocation of additional funding for it. Our street resurfacing program gets annual allocations. And so this one's been active since we initiated this project numbering scheme in 2018. Yes.
Ryan, I'm concerned that fiscal year 24 through 25 has a lower dollar value, and taking into account inflation, that seems to be dramatically lower results. I would expect these numbers to go up, not down, and that's a concern to me.
You know, again, we really heavily front loaded that first year. And, you know, as we ran the 3 scenarios, it factors in some inflation factors as well as deterioration curves in there. Quite frankly, I don't think we could deliver more in that first year. It's going to be fairly impactful for the city.
Yeah, I'm concerned that the second 24 through 25
Yeah.
is reduced, but a good point that I had forgotten was the front loading of the efforts. So
Yeah.
thanks for that reminder.
So you're seeing the front loading. Yeah, it is going to taper off, and you know, we're going to get down to more of a steady state after we get to that front loading. So this is to kind of push us up that mountain so we can have a good landing.
Very good. Thank you.
Can I ask a question just because I think we don't? Will that APR 1801 stay the same and those funds are just added to it?
Yes, those funds are added. Very practical question. Okay. There's that graph that we've finally been able to. I feel like we're ready to send people to the moon after all the work that's gone into this, and we've shown that we can get there. And next one is street light replacement. We do have a number of street lights that do get knocked down from time to time. We do our best to recover funding through that, through claims with their insurance and stuff like that. But and some of that gets funneled back into the fund to replace them. But we replaced a couple of streetlights this last budget, got materials on hand for quite a few more up at our corporation yard, just because we have long lead times on streetlights. And so now we're looking to fund installation of those streetlights and then have some funding available to continue on with the program should we have any other knockdowns. So we are finalizing our next on-call contract for a contractor that can start installing these, and we're going to get back into the streetlight installation business. But that's a request for $250,000 in general fund, and that's the same at level that went into the last 2-year budget. So. The next one, this is related to the Del Monte extension. You know, a lot of the stuff that's been coming forward in the public and to council has been focused on that Del Monte extension proper. But ultimately, that was just one piece of a greater plan to improve access to the city's downtown, access for the future development of what we refer to as Cypress Knolls, improvements to traffic from Imgen Parkway getting onto Highway 1 so that it's not backing up on Imgen Parkway as much, and just improving general freeway interchange and flow in that between Imgen and downtown area. Also included is that Patton Parkway extension. Currently, if people don't, if they're southbound on Highway 1 and they don't hit that reservation exit to go downtown, they're gonna go past and they have to get off at Imgen, go across the bridge, turn around and come back to go downtown. And we're trying to get vehicles into the downtown a little bit easier to support Marina and the businesses. But freeway interchanges like this are, hundreds of millions of dollars, and Marina's not going to have those kinds of funding. So the process with the state is you have to go through what we call a project, prepare a project initiation document, working with Caltrans and following their standards for the types of studies you have to do, the level of analysis and planning, to show that, hey, this is a viable project. It's going to work with the standards that are in place. And once that's completed and accepted, then it becomes a project on a list. Once it's a project on a list, then it's eligible for these different pots of funding from the state and federal government that can be allocated to it. Some of it will have to be competitive, but if we can demonstrate that it's a regional project benefit, then we get partners like TAMC that come on board that can help with attracting the funding for a bigger project like this. Continuing to try to move the Del Monte extension forward by itself, we're at over $10+ million on that. And the traffic volumes on it from a regional competitive project type, standpoint aren't high enough and don't show enough benefit to attract those larger state and federal dollars. So it's going to be a I would say decade-long process for sure. But this is probably our best avenue forward to attracting those dollars that we're going to need. We'll still continue moving forward with projects potentially to extend Patton Parkway and looking at how much of a project we can get through for that Del Monte extension and see what we can do to attract funding in the meantime. But we ultimately want to get to this bigger project, and that's kind of the future. So funding source for that, there was, they called that the ARPA funds. I should know what that stands for, my American Recovery something, that was allocated to governments during COVID for the COVID expenses. And those they aren't terribly restricted as far as federal dollars typically go. So it's recommended that we apply this towards getting this bigger project moving forward.
Right now, one quick question. This project is strictly for planning and studies. It's not for any implementation. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would not be for implementation. This would be planning and studies to get it initiated. It is a
Into a larger.
viable project on a list for moving forward for those dollars for implementation. Mhm. The next one, another street project. We have a lot of development going on over in the dunes. This is an existing project, 8th Street extension between 3rd Avenue and California or 5th Avenue. And this would be the section of roadway that's closed right now that is south of what will become the Hilltop Park, and connect into California there, which provides us access to the equestrian center and heading north on California to Imgen Parkway. And if you continue on to 8th eastbound, we won't be improving with this project beyond California, but you'll still be able, it's open to traffic to connect to Inner Garrison and CSUMB. So that's a $3.5 million, eligible for what we call the Community Facilities District funding. It was formerly a Fort Ord Reuse Authority capital improvement program. Fort Ord Reuse Authority has gone away. We have a couple of our developers that are contributing funds as they pull building permits on their developments, and we're accumulating funds that can be applied to those former FORA CIP projects to get them done. Next one, associated with that, California Avenue between Imogene Parkway and 8th Street it's been closed for quite some time because the developer was doing construction on California. We're fairly close to opening that up again. But the developer only improved the street on the frontage of where they're developing. They didn't do the full width development because that's the city responsibility. So this would be the funding to complete that build out. And that would also, along with that, the Fortag Trail is heading up on the east side of California Avenue. And that will be coming to the city here in the next few years. So this would be $3 million for impact fees to complete the construction of that, the widening of that California Avenue in that segment.
So you've mentioned a couple times the Fortag Trail, and I know it's been going on for a long time, but I don't know exactly how it gets through Marina. Except it
Yes.
goes by the new sports park,
Mhm.
correct? I know where it ends up, but I don't know how it gets through the city. Could you go over that real quick?
I'm not gonna be able to go over that in this
Just-
presentation,
well,
but
Maybe
I,
next time?
yeah, and that's one thing, next time I talk
Coming
to,
up a lot.
when I talk to the transportation agency for Monterey County, they've got a couple projects funded in the city right now. It's probably time that they came and made a presentation on the Fortag Trail for those segments and to present kind of the overall, what the network looks like in the environmental document that was approved for the city of Marina in general. So definitely we'll want to have the Public Works Commission involved when that they're here for that presentation.
Thank you.
Is that something that's online?
No, I mean, it is, but we're not going to do it as part of this item. But no, we'll have Tamsin present that. Next one, Salinas Avenue widening. We have Sea Haven in construction. They're building out their phase 4 near Carmel Avenue to the east of Salinas Avenue. Eventually, they're going to complete that, and Carmel Avenue has been closed for quite some time. People are going to be beckoning to have that opened up so that residents have from Abrams and Preston and the Sea Haven development have the ability to head west on Carmel. Problem is, once we open that, you can see that picture in the lower left there. The first street that intersects it is a substandard per residential street standards as far as roadway width and facilities. And I can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be an increase in traffic on that street as soon as that street opens up. So it's going to be the battle of the neighborhoods at that time. So this is just the first $1 million on this. The developer is obligated to put $1.57 million towards the project. And then we'll either through our impact fee program or other funding, we'll have to identify funds for the remainder of that. But this will get this project into design. So we got a better chance of getting it into construction sooner rather than later.
Is the plan, Brian, to use Salinas Street then as a arterial or collector street to get people from Salinas to the highway and vice versa? And if so, would it be routed through Carmel Avenue or would it go ultimately through Rheindaler to California? And the reason I asked the question, because if it's the former through Carmel, that would be going through the heart of at least one school. Would it be two? No, because no, the other one's on the other side of California. So
Yeah, I would say generally, I think I would anticipate that a lot of the traffic is going to either turn left and take the Rheindaler or head north and hit Reservation, because those are going to be the faster and wider streets to travel on. There may be some additional traffic on Carmel, but I anticipate once they get those faster flowing streets, they're gonna go out to the arterials.
They're coming from Recreation, right? So they're either going to make a lap on Saloon Street in California,
Yeah.
or go all the way down to Del Monte.
Del Monte, or the one parallel I want to see is, I always get them mixed up because it changes there. It's either Bear or Bostic.
Yeah, they're turns into money.
Yeah, if you look at the width of Bear,
Yeah.
Bear compared to what this is gonna become, to me, it would make more sense to go down to Bear.
Would.
Yeah, and so, with anticipation of those choices of drivers, what we presented and the plan for this is, we're gonna incorporate traffic calming into the design of the street from the onset of this project. We'll incorporate the bulb outs and the partial medians. So as you're turning onto the street, it doesn't look like a straight shot thoroughfare. You're gonna have to go towards the center more for the bulb outs and go out towards the edge for the partial medians, to discourage the higher speeds on that street and try to retain a more residential feel. Also included on the east side would be a separate, what we call a class 1 bicycle pedestrian path that's grade separated from the traffic. So it's going to look and feel more like something that's residential and more inviting to pedestrians and bicycles, as opposed to people coming down Carmel and wanting to turn up something that's been historically functioning as a residential street.
And this is tier 1 and slated for this year?
These are in tier 1, yes.
Thanks.
No, it won't. That's a separate project identified in our impact fee program, over on Salinas Avenue. And we're looking at, as always, if it's a light, we want to look and see if a roundabout will work. And the reason we look at a roundabout there is that's kind of the entrance into Marina. I mean, we have the speed limit signs that try to slow people down now, but having a roundabout at that end, approaching the city's downtown or the proper, gets people down to a slower speed and kind of sets the tone of, hey, you're not on a high speed thoroughfare anymore. Next one is Rheindaler and California Avenue intersection improvements. And this is to signalize the intersection. It's identified in our mitigation fee program as a project to accommodate growth in traffic due to the developments that are occurring in the city. But also it's along that route that FARTAG is coming up California, and we'll actually have some improvements at this intersection. So we're trying to time it so that we're ready when the FARTAG trail comes, and we can kind of coordinate some of those designs with the transportation agency for Monterey County and have something that works together.
A comment on this is, or a question, I suppose, wouldn't a roundabout be more sensible than a traffic light?
If you go out and look at the kind of the available right of way there, a roundabout, generally, it wouldn't fit in that intersection. The intersection size is fairly constrained.
Oh, is that the
yeah,
problem?
It would be a
Okay.
lot of right of way acquisition just to even make that. And there are grade differences as you go across that intersection. So it's not a simple right of way acquisition. I mean, it would involve taking large portions of people's property and maybe to the point where it would affect their home structure or the usable yards themselves.
I believe they call that eminent domain, correct?
Yeah, probably not the
It's
most.
for the people.
Yeah, not a process I'd recommend going down. Yes.
Quick question also, signalize, what type of red light or traffic signal light is that? The only reason I ask is because there's a number of lights that in my travels through the area would be much better if they were smart lights rather than what appear to be strictly timed lights.
Oh, yeah. So it would be lights with our, we have cameras on our intersections that identify traffic. So, the traffic engineers, they can come up with a system and the control for them depending on the time of day. the timing sequence can change. It can be during the higher peak traffics, it can be working on one program that maybe work better on a timing because the traffic's going to be fairly constant during the peak hours. In the off time, when the traffic is lower and maybe not as consistent, you might have more from one leg for a while, and that might shift to another leg for a while. Then it can go to something where it detects the traffic and alters the timing so that the vehicles waiting can get a green light sooner. So that's typically how the systems are working now, and we would incorporate that.
Now, that method of detecting the traffic, is that a method that requires township maintenance?
Oh, yes, it does.
Cleaning of the lenses because of
yes.
the fog and such?
Exactly. At some point, who knows, we may go to more of an infrared technology that isn't as affected by the clouding, but we're working with traffic engineers that love to be on the forefront, and if they've got that technology to recommend, those will come forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
And also back to the seats. There are
Yeah, well, we know the Fortag trail is coming through there, so they'll be implementing some changes in conjunction with that project. But we want to be able to kind of coordinate that design with them to make sure that we can accommodate those improvements. Okay, next one is another one associated with the Fortag project. But it's also a project identified in our impact fee program. And so this one shows kind of bicycle and pedestrian. The picture there shows bicycle and pedestrian improvements at the intersection. What it's not showing is in our impact fee program, we add some dedicated right turn lanes to the intersection. So that's what that $500,000 is for. And what you're seeing there is something that might be similar to what Fortag would implement at that intersection as part of their project. So again, we want to get these projects moving forward with design dollars on them so that we can coordinate those designs with TAMC and the Fortag trail that's going to be coming through here. And I can say, as a cyclist, this is one of my least favorite intersections, traveling southbound on California, going up that hill and then having all those cars turn right, and I have to become a pedestrian and go over up the ramp to push the button and then try to get back in the intersection as all these people are turning right. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement at this intersection. Okay, next one is Del Monte and Reservation intersection improvements. This is something that the city has applied for a grant from Transportation Agency within the last month, basically. But this is the intersection of Reservation and Del Monte. And it's a very high trafficked intersection. And if you've tried to navigate that intersection as a pedestrian, it's not the most comfortable because you got a lot of cars making right turns on the southeast corner. And there's currently there is no pedestrian crosswalk on the southern leg of the intersection. So this is a project to get crosswalks on all four legs, not only crosswalks for pedestrians, but also bikeways adjacent to them. This intersection is adjacent to the Monterey Bay Recreational Trail. It gets a lot of bicycle traffic through that intersection. So looking to improve sight distances, reduce crosswalk distances, straighten crosswalks, and improve the situation for bicycles and pedestrians. And if we can implement this with the traffic in the downtown, we've probably handled the biggest traffic challenge to implementing the downtown vitalization improvements on Del Monte and Reservation. So I think this is going to be a good first effort. And so should the city be successful in getting the funding, 1.7 million grant, our proposed match is $140,000. So we can get a pretty good project for a minimal investment by the city. Next project is Imogen Parkway and Third Avenue traffic signal. This is to signalize that Third and Imogen. And this is a intersection that I want to say in 2019, January 2019, or December 2019, January 2020, we had a fatality at this intersection, which set us about looking to see what we can do to improve safety there. City's consultant prepared some options, did a study on the history of this intersection. Ultimately, this was rolled into the citywide traffic safety improvement plan. And that plan made the city eligible to compete for Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funding. In this last round of the grant funding, the city was successful in getting grant funding for $943,650 for this signalization of this intersection. Staff is recommending that the remainder of the funding come from the Regional Surface Transportation Program funding. And that's funding that's allocated by TAMC to the agencies. There's an allocation based on formula, fair share that the city of Marina gets for each round. We have enough money to fully fund this project with grant funds.
Brian, this is the intersection that is, if you come off the freeway, right, on Imogen, either way, and you're heading east, it's the one intersection right past the first light, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So if we're putting in roundabouts at Second and all the way up, and then a light in between those roundabouts, is it not possible that people heading east will create a backlog if that light's red that will enter into the roundabout and stop dead traffic in coming off of Second Avenue and going up Imogen until the light turns green? And why wouldn't another roundabout be proposed versus light? I thought we were getting away from lights.
Yeah, I don't think roundabouts are recommended for the western leg of this. We've had the consultant look at both roundabout here and light, and they did recommend the traffic signal at this location. That might be, as the situation you described, might be more of a factor at, say, California Avenue or Abrams, which would be the first signal after the roundabout on the widening. But it's not recommended that the traffic signals westbound. We can do things with the signal timing and stuff like that, but it just hasn't been the recommendation of our traffic consultants.
That just makes no sense.
And-
We're building, we're widening the road, we're adding roundabouts, and we're gonna interject lights in between those roundabouts.
No, we're not, this is not between the roundabouts. This is,
Roundabout stop for their-
this is.
So there won't be a roundabout at Second either?
Second,
So you'll get off the
no.
freeway, there'll be light, and then you hit the roundabouts?
There'll be light at Second, light at Third, light at California, light at Abrams, and then you hit the roundabouts.
Okay, I thought there was a roundabout down at Second for
No.
whatever reason.
No, that intersection won't accommodate a roundabout. There's just
All the
too
way to
many.
Imogen Road is where the roundabouts are.
Say that again?
All the way to Imogen Road is where the roundabouts would head,
Okay,
if you're going east.
Yeah, so no, we're not interspersing roundabouts and signals.
yeah, geez,
That's the same reason we're gonna stop at some point, only bracket the entrances to the town on Del Monte and Reservation, because it doesn't work to sequence lights and roundabouts in a high traffic downtown type situation either, so. Next one, Del Monte and Beach Roundabout Safety Improvements. This is another one that got that grant. Another one that we can match with regional fair share funds. Since completion of the construction of this roundabout, there have been a number of vehicles leave the roadway on the northbound direction of Del Monte. I'd say they all have some fairly similar factors involved. A certain time of day, sometime around bar closing maybe, but but it is a concern, and we do have some funding through this grant to look at ways to better, you know, alert motorists that they're entering a roundabout, slow them before they get into the roundabout, and reduce the number of vehicles that have trouble encountering that particular movement. So. Well, it's going to take more than streetlights. Yes, I did. Wait a minute. Yes. Thank you. Okay, the next ones are not as glamorous. We hit kind of some of the bigger roadway projects. We do have a couple areas in the city that have some habitual localized flooding. One you may have heard of is Marina Drive, south of Palm. It affects a number of residents that this Marina Drive is kind of their only way to and from where they live on that southern end of the downtown. Currently, people tend to drive off the roadway where the ground is higher. Where there are potholes, it's unimproved roadway. This would be to address the drainage at this low point so that we no longer have those ponding issues. The next one is a section, a location on Carmel Avenue. And it's between Zanetta and California on the south side. There's a small Asian market there and a restaurant and kind of a beauty salon and that. But the drainage, the system on the street isn't adequate to accept this drainage on this property and sometimes backs up onto the property. And it's been a problem for a number of years. Staff has had to respond to this location during storms fairly frequently. So we want to address this and address this situation so we don't have that frequent flooding here. Next one is one of our 77 percolation lots throughout the city. We do have storm drain pipes that bring the water into the percolation lots so that the water can percolate. The pipe that's going to this lot on Kennedy Court is an older corrugated metal pipe, has been corroded, and as a sinkhole forming there it's not performing the job that it's supposed to. So this is money to fix that pipe and get the system working properly. The next one.
Quick question.
Okay.
How old would that drain pipe be? How long do they last typically?
I'd be guessing at this.
No
Some of these neighborhoods predate incorporation of the city. So I'm to say older than 1975. And, I don't think metal pipe was intended to last that long. And nobody puts metal pipe in the ground anymore. We've gone more towards concrete or types of plastic pipe that don't deteriorate like this.
Thank you.
This next one, we've added some blue tarps to this building to kind of highlight the need. But as long as I've been here early in the city's incorporation, the city brought in these temporary structures for council chambers and city hall. We still have them, wherever the topic comes up of, hey, we need to reinvest some money in these. the discussion kind of quickly goes towards, well, we should really build a new city hall. We've been doing that for so long that, and we don't have a new city hall yet. And so it's kind of at the point where we do have to do some maintenance on these buildings, roofs, flooring in here. I kind of like this carpet. It reminds me of the 70s and it's held up remarkably well. But, we've got a lot of dated, fixtures and restrooms and all kinds of stuff that are kind of have you scratching your head from time to time. So kind of recommendation that we, some of that unallocated fund balance from general fund go towards fixing the roof. So. It's either that or we got to change the color of the tarp from time to time for entertainment.
Yeah, there you go.
We got our public safety building over here, and they went most of this last winter without an HVAC system to kind of regulate the working environment in there, and that's really not acceptable for anybody working anywhere. So we got some quotes on replacing their HVAC rooftop unit. It needs to be replaced at this time. Next one, interesting picture. Shower and laundry. Our fire department, they live on site. They have shifts that live on site throughout the week so they can respond to emergency calls, which means they have to do personal hygiene and laundry. The shower facilities that they have are fairly old and could use a refresh, looking at replacing that enclosure and fixtures. And then also plumbing in to add a washer and dryer on site so they can do their laundry while they're on site. The next one, everybody needs storage somewhere in the city. The fire department has a fire station out at the airport. They have one shipping container, the red one there that they do some storage in. The yellow one is for training. There are container top systems that puts a roof over, two adjacent containers like that can provide some, some level of enclosure out of the elements to park things in between for equipment and stuff like that. So that's what this budget is for, to get some storage space out of the elements. Next one, the Los Arboles Sports Complex, actually owned by the school district. There's some co-use agreements with the city. The city provided this, the building, the sports center, the sports complex building there that some of our recreation staff work out of, working with the school district on different programs and stuff. But it's an older decking that surrounds that, and it's rotting and is no longer safe. On the south side, we did replace the decking a couple of years ago, let's say 2-3 years ago, and we went in with concrete around it so that we won't have the problems with the decking rotting in the future. We're proposing doing the same for the remainder of the decking around the building itself. And that's what this money is for.
Two things. That deck has needed to be replaced for many years because my oldest boy turned 31 today. And I can't remember if it was he or my second child, who's 26, that while I was watching one of his pony games, I stepped through one of the 2x4s. It broke. Yeah, almost
Maybe you can sign it.
broke
or
my
replace
ankle.
it.
The other thing too, is I don't know if somebody from the city reaches out to, the various clubs like Rotary, for example, but I know Mike Mast is involved with Marina Rotary, number one. He's also the softball coach of Marina High School that plays at Los Arboles. And I'm also, I was a Rotarian up until about 3 weeks ago. And we have spent a lot of money uh, building up that field, the storage sheds, the dugouts, the field itself. And I know for a fact Rotary has money that they're looking to invest, and they might be able to pitch in to help out with this deck. So might be worth somebody making a phone call.
I think I know somebody I'm gonna talk to about that. We now have a recreation and cultural services director that might be good to start building those relationships in the community. So I'll bring it up with her. Next one, this is actually a building out at our airport. The police use it for training and storage out at the airport. It's in need of exterior painting and gutter replacement, kind of a basic building preservation maintenance need. So that's $30,000 recommended to go towards that building. And it's used by the police department and not we're kind of like the tenant there in this regard within the actual airport enterprise system out there. So that's why we're recommending that the city make the contribution to preserve this building that isn't being used for an aeronautic use right now. Now we're getting into some of the stuff that's still building related. These are getting very high-tech stuff. This first one is an alerting system for fire stations 1 and 2. And that kind of schematic kind of shows how these systems generally work. So the old system, fire stations, when an alert came in to dispatch, county dispatch, this tone would go out over the radio. And the tone was a little bit different for each station. And so that tone coming across, I don't know if you've heard that maybe around some of the fire departments and stuff, it's just kind of like 2 or 3 tones. And what that tone would do was trigger the alerting system in the fire station to let the firefighters in that station know that, hey, you need to roll out now. You've got a call coming in. We've gone quite a bit farther than that. Things are more digital. Now the call can go directly from commuter aided dispatch, either through an internet protocol network or through mobile systems, and get the signal to the station with much more data quicker and more efficiently. So now they know more than just we're getting called out. They know where they're getting called out to as they're getting ready to get on their apparatus and leave the station. The other thing it does is, there are sleep times for the firefighters, and it goes into their sleeping quarters. And they've done a lot of studies on the waking up of the firefighters in the middle of the night to go on these calls, just hitting them with loud alarms and bright lights right away is showing that it's not probably the best thing for their health. So that these systems are kind of built to kind of bring them to their alertness a little bit less stressful. And then also they're cooking in the station at the time, they can incorporate automatic shutoffs for the gas appliances and electric appliances and stuff as they go out. So, if the pot doesn't get left on the stove, and start a fire in the station while they're out. So they incorporate a lot of these things into these systems now, and they're fairly complex, but it's time for updating that fire station 1 and 2. The next project is a building access control and security. You see a lot of things in the news happening these days, and as far as security of sites, workplaces, and stuff like that. And we want to be transparent and open to the public for service, but at the same time, we want to eliminate vulnerabilities to the extent that we can. So I think, there's room for quite a bit of improvement for the access to our facilities and security for the workers as we're here on site. So. Oh, I don't know. I didn't see it. Okay, about these systems or? Okay, yeah. So there are places that, you know, we will make available to the public for service, and then there are other parts of the building that are there for employees. They're not public spaces, so we want to make sure we keep those separate and, you know, the interface with the public safe. Okay. See a lot more EVs out there as we transition our fleet whenever we're looking at replacing vehicles or equipment. More and more, we're looking at, are there viable electric options? To make those work within the city, we have to have places to charge them. So at the corporation yard, we'd like to add a couple of EV charging stations. We're currently looking at replacing a sweeper and mowers. And we do know that there are electric options out there. And so those are a couple of things that might be some of our first public works fleet that would go electric, but we do need to charge them. And, you know, we're saying we want to put some money in the budget. This is one of those things where we'll definitely be seeking, are there grant funding opportunities through the Air District or the Community Choice Energy. They have grant programs not only for charging stations, but also for the equipment themselves, so to offset some of those costs. Next one, City Hall Annex. We do have some charging stations down there, no longer operational. They do need some maintenance to get up and running. Those ones were put in place actually for the public. They need to get up and running, but also there's a grant funding opportunity through, I believe, the Air District that we've said that we would like to have a couple more charging stations down at the annex and also out at the library. So we'll be working with them to try to get funding for those as well. Yes.
Seems surprising to me that this money would come from the general fund. Isn't there some other? Everybody's promoting EV. It seems strange that general fund sounds like we're paying out of pocket.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back and look at the agreements, but I'm pretty sure those were installed as one of these initial grant funding type scenarios to make them available to the public, with the city having the obligation to maintain them going forward. That maintenance just hasn't happened. So I don't know that we'll be able to attract additional grant funding for what we already received it for.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The next one is kind of speaking to where we got to in this building, City Hall, and all the other city facilities that are aging, along with our parks. City currently doesn't have a facilities and parks maintenance plan, like an ongoing maintenance plan that says, hey, we've got this much unfunded maintenance currently in the buildings, and you know, this is what it's going to take going forward to maintain the buildings, and identify how we accumulate those funds over time so that it's available when we do have to do the maintenance that's required on parks and facilities. So this would be a project to put together that plan and chart a way forward. It's kind of like taking that pavement management program that we have for the streets and identifying something similar for the facilities and parks, so that we don't have surprises, we don't get down the road, and we don't have tarps on buildings longer than we should. Next one, Gloria Jean Tate Park improvements. We've got a wonderful new pump track out there. It gets a lot of use, but there are plans to move forward and re-envision the remainder of Gloria Jean Tate Park. So, you know, getting the estimates together, it looks like we're going to need about another 6.3 million. And we're recommending that come from parks impact fees, because some of these are new features being added to the park, eligible for those fees, as well as there are some unrestricted land sales revenue that was generated from the development sale of properties for the developments going forward. So it's recommended that we move forward and complete that park that's already been started.
Is there a key
for all the numbered items?
Yeah, there is, and I have to tell you, this is an older, there's another iteration after this. I just couldn't find the diagram to clip and paste in here. The parking lot, well, no, actually, this is the parking lot and the configuration, so this may be the most current. Is there something in particular you're looking for?
2 and 13 down there along Cordoza.
I would say one is a pickleball court and the other one is a bocce courts.
Okay.
And I think the latest I saw in there had 2 pickleball courts as we're working forward in the designs.
Cool.
Next one, Dunes Park Development. You know, we've gone through a process, public's weighed in on different phases. Seems like people have settled into that option 2 that was discussed here. But it's a fairly large ticket project to the tune of more like $20 million plus. So we're looking at phasing this in. This is $1.5 million to go along with $8.5 million that the developer is committed towards the park development for the initial phase. So we're working with the landscape architect to identify, you know, what are viable $10 million packages for the initial development of the park. Next one is Preston Park upgrades. $1 million already been committed to the park. We've looked at options for expansion. We're looking more in the 10 million plus for expansion and rehabilitation of the park. We're recommending at this time that we go with more of a $2 million project to rehabilitate the turf and the sports fields that are existing there and look at adding back in a playground. So more keeping the configuration the way it is, but bringing it up to date and, you know, addressing some long-term maintenance in the existing park.
And when you say turf, you're referring to the current grass, right?
Yes.
Versus an artificial turf.
Yeah, I don't know that we have plans for artificial in there. Not at
I would
this
think the
time.
number would be higher.
Yeah. Next one is, there's been a lot of activity out at the equestrian center. One thing that happened over the last year was the equestrian boarding went away, of, you know, private boarding being available for people. There's still an interest for a facility where that's possible. Adjacent to the equestrian center is the Los Animas concrete plant. And there were some areas, fenced off areas being used by contractors through a program in a local builders exchange. They're no longer there. We've asked them to move along. That program is no longer operating. So we have some space there that could potentially be used for equestrian boarding. It would be adjacent to our equestrian facilities. So there may be some, you know, symbiotic, you know, opportunities there. You know, people boarding their horses there could use the facilities at the equestrian center as well as go off into the trails. No commitment as of yet. We're working with the Marina Equestrian Association to see if we can come to an agreement and move forward to develop plans for that. We just don't have any funds dedicated for that effort at this time. So this is money that we're asking to add to that so we can do the staff and consultant effort to see if we can get there. We can't use the funding for the adjacent equestrian center because that's National Park Service. You know, National Park Service funding is restricted. We can't use it for anything but recreational uses open to the public on that property. So we have to have a separate funding source for this. Next one, heading back to Las Arbolas, court resurfacing. There's interest in restriping the lower court for pickleball courts. That's something we've approached the district about partnering on that And then the upper tennis courts are sadly in need of resurfacing or restriping and resurfacing as well. So this is $75,000 to go towards that effort and refresh those courts here in the community.
Hey, you have, Brian, on up there, the two top courts are now still tennis courts?
Yes,
And
that's
then
correct.
the lower are specifically for pickleball. Would those be striped specifically for pickleball or a hybrid so you could do both?
I don't know what the agreements are at this point. I know it's to be striped for pickleball. I don't know if it's going to be hybrid or not.
Just a comment and maybe even a recommendation. So pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the United States for the third year in a row. And Meadowbrook Tennis Club only has 3 tennis courts left,
Wow.
only 3. They just restriped the main pavilion where all the major matches were. It's pickleball only. And then the others will be pickleball only. And then the group of 7 or 6 when you walk in have just been converted to be a hybrid of both pickleball and tennis, but they will be converted to pickleball only.
Wow.
So just so Marina understands that the tennis is kind of going south and pickleball's going way north. Just saying, the more we ignore that, or if we decide to ignore that, it'll come up later is my guess.
Okay.
The minority of people, there are very few tennis players left anymore.
Dunes Park, you said initially had been, they decided on tennis, but I
They
see pickleball there.
the city council overruled pickleball and went with tennis.
This still says both.
Yeah, but it was to be, the original plan was pickleball.
Yeah.
My understanding is that there was somebody that supported tennis that stayed until 1 a.m. when they voted,
Die hard.
and they got the vote. So that one person got the vote.
So that diagram on the Dunes Park hasn't been updated since what was presented at that time. So yeah, we haven't gone to any efforts to update that. I, for one, am glad that we now.
By the way, Chamiso is doing exactly the same thing. And Carmel Valley Athletic Club, the management up there is catching absolute grief from the members that want pickleball. They have got a good, solid tennis constituency. They're the older folks with money that live up there that still play tennis, that want tennis. But there's a lot of older folks that are members up there. I play pickleball with them, that are really upset that they're not embracing pickleball. So anyway.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we have a recreation and cultural services director to navigate this all. So we'll have her engaged as we move forward on these projects, and because I don't want to mess with the Hells Angels of pickleballs playing here.
I tell you, it's the ladies too. They're the Hells Angels of pickleball. They're amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Very inspiring.
Okay. Okay, the next one is the teen center playground resurfacing. You can see the surface it was surfaced at one time. It's getting a little bit thin there, and it needs to be restriped for play there at the teen center. So time for some improvements there. Now we're going to get into more of the IT planning type stuff. And so I can't speak too intelligently to all of this stuff, but these are things that have been identified by the police department, other departments, and city administrative staff that could help with operations or. Yes, Commissioner.
Police stuff comes under Public Works.
No, this is recommended to go into the capital improvement program. It's the
Oh,
capital
okay.
improvement program for the city. And so I'm just presenting this as an item in the capital improvement program, but
I appreciate the clarity.
yeah,
Thank you.
I won't be the one making decisions on what kind of cameras and equipment they need. It's just getting it into the budget, so. But these are body cameras and cameras in the cars that you see footage from, and I don't know, do they even still have that show called Cops? I don't know.
Well, they already have cameras.
Yeah. So.
Ask me how I know.
Okay, next one. Police Department staffing study. Looking for adequate levels for service and the stuff they do for the community. And probably to figure out how many body cameras to buy, so. But that's more for the police. Police vehicle tracking cameras. They have these camera systems now that will do license plate recognition and vehicle recognition. If you intersperse enough of the cameras through the community, you can kind of catch vehicles coming through on fence zones. And if they're engaged in some sort of crime in the city and there's an identification of the vehicle, it helps in the police following up and apprehending those people. Payment and registration portals, bringing us into the 21st century for people wanting to sign up for our programs here at the city and participate in all the great services we have. So something to improve that and streamline that and provide people with payment options. Admin records management system. You don't see this so much, but for staff, anybody coming to work in the city of Marina, trying to figure out how the filing system works. It's very much institutional knowledge based, unfortunately. And we really need to have a uniform system for filing and accessing files. Oh, and the description needs to change. Another one. You can tell I was in a hurry to finish these up. So that's a project, and actually the numbers we're seeing are coming down. They're probably closer to 250,000. So those numbers will probably come down by the time we get to city council. And that picture of the boxes dumped over, that was not the city of Marina. That was stock photos. I just thought it looked kind of like horrendous. Not that we might have something like that in the city. Okay, next one, city's general plan update. Our community development department and planning, they're embarking on this comprehensive general plan. There's some cards over here with information on how the community can get engaged in that process. These are large multi-year projects that take quite a bit of money. So there's some additional funding to complete the funding and continue that through completion. And then next, everybody's favorite topic, speed limits. So, per the state of California, every 5 years, we are required to update our vehicle speed study in the city so that the police department can utilize the radar enforcement throughout the city. And there are some very prescribed rules as to how that study's done and how speed limits are set.
Was yesterday the end of the 5th day or 5th year period, like the last day? Because
It was a day called Stop. That's
Was it?
STOP, yeah.
is that new or is that a monthly
It's a
thing?
yearly thing.
Yeah.
Really?
And it was like a multi-force got together.
I've never
See,
seen so many police
know.
officers in Marina on the streets
Yeah.
as at one time that I did yesterday.
I didn't
Well,
go
they're-
much yesterday, I just stayed at work.
Marina Donuts had a sale. No, this has nothing to do with what the police were doing. As Michelle said, that it's a collaborative program between the departments. Sometimes for various events, departments call on other departments to help out with enforcement of traffic related issues around those events. those agencies reciprocate. So Marina gets the benefit of that time to time, and they ran that program. I think this is the first time since COVID, so you probably haven't seen it in a while, but it's a program that's been in place for a while around this area.
Well, they raised some serious money yesterday.
Yes,
This mandate in surveys, setting speed limits is by state law many years. And it's, I understand, it's had the impact of taking away the ability of communities to set what I would consider to be 40% on the city. But I think we roundabouts, you know, and generally coffee. Get around them. The ineffective speed limits, with, you know, physical changes in street design. Particularly for the roundabouts, so I think in separate speed limits be posted at roundabouts that don't have the criteria to maintain safe speeds going around traffic.
are you talking about the speed in the roundabout itself?
Right.
Okay, so earlier practice. Oh, speed approaching. Well,
Entering a roundabout at 50 miles an hour, turning off.
well, I don't know that those vehicles were looking for speed limit signs, but we could probably get into quite a few of the different aspects of how the speed surveys are done here. But generally the speeds are taken at a location where traffic has enough time to kind of get up to a speed where the drivers feel comfortable. So kind of a steady state speed. So it would be somewhere between the roundabouts where the traffic has achieved that. And, yeah, it's prescriptive. It does take away the ability for agencies to basically say, well, we feel this is a safe speed for this street. If you might have agencies that are much more conservative than other cities. So drivers, depending on where they're going throughout the state, you'll probably have kind of like the gas buddy thing of, which the cities are the most restrictive on speed limits versus the others. So it's trying to get a more uniform approach to setting speed limits. There's a lot of debate and concern within communities, a lot of things that people don't like and how that plays out. But, the other aspect of this is perception. I often say it's set by the 85th percentile. So it's kind of the one time a day when they take that survey, the drivers actually get to vote for what speed they feel comfortable driving on that road. And that's kind of the concept of how those are set. There are certain streets, residential streets at 41 feet or narrower automatically are 25 miles per hour. It doesn't matter if people feel like they want to go faster on that street. It's just 25 miles an hour. School zones can be set at more restrictive speeds. But generally outside of that, there was some change in law related to downtown business districts, but it was very specific criteria around that as to, if you meet certain criteria, you can adjust those speeds or not. But this would be for the city to hire a consultant that does these surveys on a regular basis, familiar with that, making those determinations. And I expect there will be community discussion around this when it does come forward. Okay, next one. Try to get a hold of our airport manager, so I learned a little bit about this, but there's an airport grant program called MAP through Caltrans to improve airport operations throughout the state. And this is something that the city would like to go forward for some of that grant match funding. There potential opportunity to use some of those ARPA funds that came to the city during COVID to really help out at implementing the master plans. out there at the airport. So that's it for the tier one. I got to this other slide in here that just says tier two. I thought I was at the end of the presentation, but then I realized we got another tier to go. I always tell people I knew I was going to go to tears over this budget process. Okay, next one, we did have some funding in the last round on traffic signal maintenance and upgrades. We've gone through a process of inventorying the traffic signals at intersections, identified some maintenance that we need additional funding for. I would say we're focusing more on the downtown signals where we're going to have the higher pedestrian vehicle traffic as you know, our first efforts here. And there are also signals that we know we're probably not going to be going to roundabouts in the future. So we want to maintain the investment in the signals that are going to stay there. In conjunction with that, we've done surveys for ADA improvements in the downtown, those same four signals between Rhine-Dollar, I want to say, and California. No, Crescent, sorry, Crescent. I also identified it's going to be a bit more extensive. So together, this will probably be packaged into a larger project together. A lot of our PED buttons, standards have changed for pedestrian activation buttons where they're located in proximity to the crosswalk. Often they're too far away and we don't have adequate identification of the crosswalk ramps and stuff for people to make it more visible. Well, that went quick. Now we're on to tier three, picking up speed. But there are a few more projects in tier three. Community center deferred maintenance. We had in tier one, these other facilities that are aging as well and need some help. So community center deferred maintenance, 500,000. Teen center deferred maintenance, 300,000. Windy Hill Park playground upgrades. Working on this a little bit with that number might change slightly, go down maybe 50,000, but there's already a project to put a restroom and replace the playground there. It's just that we feel like the way playgrounds have been going and the costs we've been seeing coming in, we probably need more money there. Oh, no, the plan is to try to go away from that. Yeah. Yeah. Something that looks more like a restroom. Here's our Del Monte Boulevard extension. This is not the full width extension between Patton Parkway and the Dunes, Engine Parkway. As this came forward and presentations and people saw how much habitat was going to be impacted, Sanguilia type species. One of the suggestions that came forward was maybe as an initial interim, maybe we can look at some sort of bicycle pedestrian connector path that'll at least go through and maybe have less impact to the Sanguilia. In that 10 million is included that Patton Parkway extension up to Del Monte. So it wouldn't stop at the high school, it would continue up and connect through. And then we have some big recreation facilities that have big price tags attached to them in tier three, which means, some of these tier three projects are, they're likely to be outside of available funding. We need to look at developing funding for them and, kind of identifying funding that may be coming down the road at the city. So got the pool building and then the sports center building currently in design, but we know we need to complete that funding plan for those facilities.
Is the pool building, is the plan to have a pool situation like in the picture here?
Yes, that's correct. We got the more typical 25 meter by 25 yard competition type pool or lap pool with the the lower temperatures that people like when they're exercising on that, in that manner. The pool on the left has areas that are heated a little more for therapeutic uses, and also those lanes for laps on the far left there, those are a higher temperature than the ones in the competition pool on the right. And then there's a shallower play area there with play structure for the children.
See that?
And this last one, actually, we don't need it. We already have $400,000 funding there to rehabilitate the duplexes. It's kind of been back and forth. Do we rehabilitate them? Try to turn them into rentals for low income? Do we try to sell them? We've been talking with people that are interested in buying them and developing them. Or they're at a point where if we don't do anything with them, we're probably going to have to demolish them. So, but there's enough money in there, the existing funding that's set aside to actually remove them. So this one won't be a budget recommendation coming forward. And that's it. No more tears. And so
And no
open
questions, Richard.
open to questions, feedback from the Public Works Commission. Anything that you had in mind that you thought might be in a capital program, didn't see there, or any?
I think there's a lot going on, so it'll be interesting to see, how everything gets executed going forward.
Yes, and I can probably maybe speak that a little bit in the next item, kind of give you an update. Yes, that's correct.
What do you have for us?
Okay, so we have recruitments that we're working through for a superintendent, a maintenance superintendent. We've moved on about a year ago. This is the third time we've opened up that recruitment. These are tough markets to try to fill positions in and recruit in. We have a few candidates coming forward. We're lining up some interviews early next month for that. We have city engineer recruitment. We have some candidates coming forward, lining up interviews for the end of this month. And then we have one position that was filled for about a year, and then they moved on closer to family in San Diego. And we have recruitment. We have some applicants coming in for that. We're looking at interviews at the middle of July for that. Seriously, me personally, and for the organization, I want to be hopeful that we find some good candidates coming through, because those are key positions in public works to move these programs forward. We've done about as much as we can with contracting. We're at the position point where we can't really add more contracts and manage them. We need more, like the city engineer position, a management level engineering position in the city, to get that capacity to take on more contracting, and also adding that engineer position into that to give us the capacity to do some of these projects in-house as well. So we're trying to build out that capacity. Those two engineering positions would be kind of a starting point as I see it. We've come up with kind of a plan that's general fund neutral to fund those positions at this time. We want to get that in place and running to see if we can extend that a bit. There may be possibilities to add another engineering position or more as we kind of analyze that over the next year or so. But for now, it's getting the positions filled that we have open and available, because I need help. We all need help, and to keep these things moving forward.
That it, Brian?
I think that's it. I think we're going to be moving through the budget process with council over the next month. We'll see. I'll talk to Tampsey about Fort Tag Trail, kind of see when they might be available for some discussions. And it may be possibly we may not meet in July. We might be looking for an August type meeting. We won't have an agenda unless there's something that is germane to the Public Works Commission. But just to let you know, might be a good time for vacations if you're planning that.
Okay. Maybe we'll have some sun by then. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be
Nice. Okay, commissioners, any questions or comments for the engineering department? No? Well, then we are adjourned. Thank you very much and everybody have a great evening.